think what we heard from a group of the brightest corporate minds in Washington was how they're struggling to figure out how to make, albeit in their employer's interest, government work after this election. And of course, the problem we shared was the government is deeply divided, which reflects a deeply divided electorate. We saw independent voters in this election vote 49-47, almost 50-50, Democrat and Republican. We didn't see a big red wave. We didn't see a blue counter wave. I'm not sure anyone came out of this election with a mandate, but what everyone came out of is bruised and battered by the hyper-partisan, ideologically extreme rhetoric. And I think corporations face two threats. One, the failure of government to do what needs to be done. And second, the potential damage to corporations, whether they're involved in corporate social responsibility, corporate social advocacy, or simply trying to solve problems that only the government can help them solve. So what do they do about it?
I think it's going to be a very difficult road ahead. The incentives in the electorate right now, show these sort of twin tides of populism and progressivism, and neither of them are going to be a friend of business. You saw 26 of the 35 U.S. Senate races featuring populists and progressives. 18 of those races, populist or progressive looks like they're going to win. Same with the governorship. 16 of 36 gubernatorial races had a populist and or a progressive on the ballot. Going to have 9 new populist governors take office. You have a whole lot of legislators, both at the federal and state level. So what companies are going to need to do is understand, what does that landscape look like? Where are there likely to be these populist or progressive impulses that are detrimental to their industry and the jobs and the economic development that they bring into communities? And so understanding where those things are likely to happen in the country is important, and then making sure they're finding friends. Who are the stakeholders that you can work with? This has been increasingly popular among companies, is finding outside voices that will speak on their behalf, and that's going to become more important as time goes on. And you want these populists and progressives to listen to some reason rather than follow those impulses.
Well, and they will only listen if people speak out. The late Matt Reese used to say, "He who lives alone dies alone, and death comes quicker to loners in politics." Corporations cannot be out there by themselves. It also strikes me that early progressive or populist actions were rewarded at the polls this year. After Governor DeSantis in Florida went after Disney, which at one time was a holy icon in Florida, as well as one of the major corporations in Florida, he also vetoed legislation of. He was only reelected by 20 points, carrying Miami-Dade County for the first time by a Republican since Jeb Bush 20 years ago. I would say the message is, if you look at the populist things Governor DeSantis did, the voters rewarded him. Other populists and progressives will notice that.
I absolutely agree. I think the piece they may miss is that he had accrued a record of governance that people appreciated, that was attracting people to the state. So to the extent that some people may or may not have agreed with where he wanted to go on some of these popular issues, that may have, I think that was a big part of it. You have to actually accomplish things in government in order to get that kind of a level of success.
And whether it was coming out of COVID or dealing with other issues, he had a solid performance record as a governor. You saw other governors reelected, whether it was a Democrat in Kansas or a Republican in Oklahoma, based on that performance. But people are looking for action, and they're looking for leadership, and they're some of the progressive and populist opportunities, I don't want to say provide cheap opportunities, but they provide opportunities that resonate with the voters.
That's right. I mean, they're looking for elected officials to do something, but is it do something to someone or do something for someone? And I think
for me, to you.
Not quite what I meant.
Yeah, but that's as we said earlier tonight. My extremism is reasonable. It's yours that's unreasonable. I was also struck in looking at the election results at the staggering amount of money that was spent. Federal races were $7 billion this year. Total spending on midterm was $19 billion, probably double 4 years ago. Corporate America is going to have to spend money to organize those friends and to have their voices heard. And it's going to take that to get anything done.
I definitely, and they're also going to need to understand who they're up against. Who are the opponents? Who's actually funding them? Where's all that money coming from? What's really motivating it? How's it going to be used? You cannot wait to find friends. For a fight to be underway to find friends, but you also can't wait for that fight to be underway to understand who your enemies are and where they're trying to take the policy direction. The other thing I think is going to be a big challenge. You talked about in Washington. It's going to be hard to get a lot of things done, but that's going to move a lot of policy to the state level, where you have a growing number of trifectas. We've added at least 4 new trifectas, governorships with both state legislatures across the country. There may be a few more added as we see the rest of the legislative votes. That's going to embolden a lot of populist progressives around the country to try and make things happen in those states. And legislative action at the state level moves a lot faster.
Absolutely does. We've seen an enormous shift of action and activity from Washington to state capitals in the last 5 to 6 years. That is where things are happening as Washington is increasingly gridlocked, and it's Austin and Sacramento and Tallahassee and Topeka and Frankfurt. And we talked about how federally permitted major infrastructure projects are getting shut down at the state, county, and even local level. And corporations are going to have to deal with that and again understand how their adversaries and their opponents are using those opportunities.
That's right. It's not enough just to know who's the governor, who's the senator, who's the congressperson. You have to know who's the mayor, who's on the city council, who's on the zoning board in some of these situations where we've both seen situations where transmission projects or projects that need transmission have been gummed up in the works, and you look at where they want to put the lines, and it's like, well, that's one of the zoning commissioner's ranches, so that's probably not going to get a yes.
Well, BP had never heard of a local official, parish official in Louisiana, but by the name of Billy Nungasser. He has ridden his fight against BP to become lieutenant governor of the state. You've got to deal with those folks. What was it Tip O'Neill said about all politics is local?